Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Millan The Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth.
Super excited for this conversation with Jackson Millan. We decided to do something a little bit different. I haven't done much of this. I did it once with Pat Rigsby, which I pretty cool. But now Jackson and I met through Jim Adams, and Jim's a great guy. So shout out to Jim if he's listening. I know they did a little podcast exchange, and he just thought we could really connect on a lot of areas, and we both agreed with that. So we figured we'd have a fun little conversation. It's not necessarily an interview. It's just a conversation around the topic that we're both passionate about, which is personal finance and those kinds of areas. So Jackson, thanks for taking the time for a conversation together.
Billy, it's awesome to do this. I think, this is business efficiency in its finest, right? We're going to spend 2 hours having two separate conversations. I'm sure we would have shared kind of similar stuff. But no, let's do it in true entrepreneurial style and pack it all into one conversation, share it with our respective audiences, and smash them with value as efficiently as we possibly can. So I'm really looking forward to it, dude.
Nice. Awesome, man. And I know we have a lot in common. And one of the differences that you could probably hear already is our accent, right? So we're in totally different parts of the world. Here I am, New York. There's a big time difference. So that's another issue with that time efficiency. But Jackson, just for my audience, just share a little bit about where you are in the world and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm Jackson Millan. I'm also known as the Wealth Mentor. I've been involved in the wealth and business strategy space for over 14 years. And my area of expertise is helping business owners understand the language of money, maximize their profit and cash flow, and then systematically turn their business profits into personal wealth so they can manufacture financial freedom. I come from pretty humble beginnings. My parents were business owners and they really struggled for most of their lives. And ultimately, they were working for money as opposed to money working for them. And I realized something was missing. They just didn't understand the language of money and how to use it as a tool to create the life they want. So I've been spending the better part of the last decade of really mastering that language of money and being able to manufacture financial freedom for myself. So at the age of 32, I built a $5 million business with a team of 27. We've got about 700 clients around the world. And I'm now 9 weeks into a year traveling around Australia in my four-wheel drive with my girlfriend, Anna, and our two dogs, Dobby and Otis. And we're currently in a really remote part of the world called Stanage. It took us about 6 hours to get here. It's North Queensland, and there's a population of about 80, which I was just saying before, Billy. I think 72 of those people are actually crocodiles. So it's pretty remote. We're out in the sticks, and we're loving it.
Nice. Now you said you're how far into your whole journey, or how far into it? Is it
9 weeks? 9 weeks and about 5,000 kilometers.
Wow. And what's the ultimately going to look like? Is it a year, or is it you're not sure yet? Or okay.
Yeah, it's going to be about a year, and we think it's going to be about 30,000 kilometers. So we've really just kind of scraped the surface, and we're just finding our feet on the road, and we're really loving it so far, mate. It's the freedom and flexibility has been amazing.
That's a cool topic. I want to get a little bit more into that. But one of the things we thought we would share is just how we kind of got to where we are. Not necessarily the whole story, but like I know for me, I've shared my story before, how my wife and I got into financial trouble. So I'll share a brief version of that. The main part of what I do now started. I'm terrible with exact timeframes and dates. All I know is my oldest daughter is. We're recording this on June 9th, and my oldest daughter is going to be 10 on June 11th, just 2 days from now. And this whole started when I was first coming into the world. So my wife and I were pretty young, starting a new family. And I was living like I thought, like I knew. I was living like everybody else that I knew. I was working. I thought I was doing really well. I was doing personal training. I was getting to help people with their fitness, and it felt really good. And I was making pretty good money. Our household income was over 6 figures at that point. And I thought we were doing pretty good until that one day. I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday morning. There was a knock on the door early in the morning. I was getting my stuff ready. I opened the door, and there's this big burly looking dude standing on my stoop. He's got tattoos everywhere, thick goatee. I looked past him, and I saw my white Honda Accord hooked up to his tow truck. I was like disbelief. It took me a minute to register what was going on. Obviously, my car was being repossessed, that he had to tell me what was going on. And long story short, one of the main takeaways for me at that point was that I didn't know that could happen. Like, it wasn't like I knew I was in trouble and like I might lose my car. Like, we were just so disorganized. You talk about the language of money. We didn't have a language of money. We knew very little. And obviously we made a ton of mistakes. But it was just so mind-boggling that I could get to this point where my car is being taken away and I didn't even know. I didn't even realize I was behind on the bills. I didn't know. And it's embarrassing, but it's the truth. That led us to digging deeper. My wife and I, it wasn't fun. It was heated discussions, let's just say. And it turns out, we were well into six figures of non-mortgage debt and all types of debt, everything you could think of, everything from credit cards, student loans, medical debts. I had loans with friends, loans with family members, like every kind of debt you could imagine we had. And how did it happen? It was death by 1,000 cuts. It was just one bad decision after the other. None of them seemed like a big deal until that day when we realized where we're at. And we swept it under the rug for long enough. And at that point, we decided that we want something different. We had time on our side, we felt, because we were pretty young and time was going to pass either way. I had been fortunate enough to be around some people that accomplished some really big things. So I had some examples of, hey, you can make your own destination. You can make better decisions. And we just said, you know what, we're going to do this. And we committed to it. That was the main thing there. Over the course of the next 5 years, we paid off every dollar of that debt and our lives just changed. So that all led to doing what I do now, which is helping other fitness professionals. Mostly can work with anybody, but I specialize in working with fitness professionals to kind of take care of their finances and learn about it, get to a better position, all things. I helped a guy earlier today with communicating with his spouse about money, helped another guy in mentorship with building wealth. I help, just those kinds of areas that I'm just so passionate about and just seeing the difference that they could make. And I'm excited. I love this. I love meeting people like you who have similar minds, who love money. And that's not a bad thing, right? You don't love money above other things, but you just like the topic. It's like a hobby for me. It's like, it's a game, right? How can we make better decisions? How can we use our time better? How can we help more people? It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
There's a lot of similarities, actually. It's scarier than you might think, because I had a very similar experience. Early in my career as a financial advisor, doing quite well, I thought. I was making over six figures. And all of a sudden, my father got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was the breadwinner of the household. He had a pretty sizable mortgage. He'd never been good at managing money, but he worked hard and he was able to save up and get a deposit on a home. But he didn't have a plan B. He thought he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. He'd never been sick a day in his life. He didn't think about his insurances and his risk management plan or his emergency fund. And all of a sudden, there was a stick that was thrown in the works. And he had a stay-at-home wife. He had a young school-age daughter at the time. And all of a sudden, the wheels come to a grinding halt. And I had a choice that I either had to allow my dad to lose the family home or I had to step up and become a man. At the same time, I was working for a big bank and I went through my first corporate restructure where a lot of my colleagues were getting made redundant and I was lucky enough to keep my job, but I took a pretty sizable pay cut. And my brilliant idea to save the family home and to cover the loss that I had in my income was to start a business. And I started a fashion business. It was called Siete Clothing Co. It was an online fashion business selling men's clothes. I'd never designed a piece of clothing in my life. I'd never built a website. I'd never ordered stuff from overseas. I'd never dealt with logistics. And I just immersed myself into a business that I was fueled by pure ego. And all of a sudden, I started spiraling into debt, trying to cover starting the business and covering all of the family costs. And then I was multi-six figures in bad debt. And I had a choice. When I realized that I was in the shit, I could either declare bankruptcy and throw my hands up and admit defeat, or I could work my way out of it. And I know that crossroads is often very difficult. And some people choose the road of going into bankruptcy or going into receivership or going into liquidation. And some people earn their way out. And you obviously chose to earn your way out, Billy. Did you ever have that crossroads yourself where you thought about throwing the towel in and just saying, hey, I'm just going to write off the next 7 years and go bankrupt and just hit the reset button?
Man, that's a good question, man. And I hadn't really thought of that. I was definitely at that crossroads. There's something in me that wasn't really a serious option for me. It was just like, man, we're gonna do this. I know how much better we'll feel at some point if we start doing this. It's definitely a crossroads.
And look, it's a hard situation, but I look back now on that situation and I see it as a blessing because I think being in a position of poverty or being in a position of being kind of financially repressed and going through financial hardship, if you can get your way through it, it's a gift because you never want to end up back in that situation again. So it's a motivating factor for every decision you make in your life. Like when you look back on that time of your life, Billy, with you and your wife and the hardship and obviously having a new family as well, what's your perspective on that situation and the lessons that you learned?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that I never would have chosen that. I would never want to go through that. I wouldn't want my friends to go through that. However, we don't grow when things are great and we're in all types of comfort. We only grow through that pain. And I do think, yeah, there's a choice there. You can either grow through it or you can just kind of curl up in a ball and just say, hey, poor me. It was like, man, I had to own that. I had to look in the mirror and said that guy in the mirror is the problem, and that guy is also the solution, or part of the solution. Of course, it was just really that going through that. It helped me in so many ways. It helped me grow tremendously. Our marriage, that's just one point. Besides everything else, besides the finances, besides being able to help other people, what that did alone for our marriage was just life changing. It brought us to a point where we're all in. We're committed to this thing. We're not going anywhere. And I trust me, I had a lot to deal with. I caused my wife a lot of ways to go through this, but she stuck with it, and it just really brought us close together, just working through that together. Even still, because we still work together on things, I don't think we would have had the same level of passion and intimacy that we have. So that's just one example. But yeah, I think it's now being used to not only help myself, my family, but all the other people that I can influence.
I love that, mate. That's fantastic. I teach a lot of my clients about the idea of looking backwards. You need to pay homage to the past in order to move forwards. And I think so many
Mhm.
people are so focused on the next thing, they actually don't stop and reflect. And it was famously said by Winston Churchill that those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat it.
Okay.
And the thing I always ponder on and try and pull from my previous experiences is what led me to abdicate financial responsibility. Because I
Yeah.
was a financial advisor, I was giving people life changing advice. And I realized that I learnt that abdication from my father. My father was
Mhm.
somebody who was a do what I say, not what I do type of person. And I kind of followed in his footsteps where I was giving great advice, but I wasn't taking it myself. And that's
Mhm.
what led me to that level of financial hardship. What was it for you, Billy, that you think led you to abdicate financial responsibility for so long, kind of bury your head in the sand and allow things to get to the way that they were?
Yeah, it was so weird because I had taken responsibility in some areas, and there was a couple of areas. Finances wasn't the only area, but like things like sports, I was all about taking responsibility, making it happen. But just with that area, it was like there's just a disconnect. And again, it wasn't the only area. One of the things I know is growing up and love my parents, and I got to make sure I preface it with that because everybody's doing the best they can with what they know, given their circumstances. And now with my own children, I realize it's not always easy, but money was never really a topic that I learned about. There were problems financially growing up, and it just wasn't one of those things that was taught. It wasn't explained. Money wasn't really considered important. I come from a very religious background, and that's common. I know it's like, hey, it's almost looked down upon. And I'm not saying my parents did this, but it was just kind of within the kind of culture that we were in. It's kind of like somebody who's wealthy. It's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if they're really like that spiritual. How could there? It was just like that tone growing up, and we know how much is shaped by us being 3 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old, and beyond. And before you know it, you're 31 years old in six figures of debt, and it's like it hits you like a ton of bricks.
I hear you, man. Okay, and there's a lot of similarities here
Mhm.
between our respective stories. And I guess this gives us the ability to really advise people from a position of having experienced all of these things to help people
Yeah.
avoid this level of hardship. Because I think you need some level of discomfort in order to grow. But the aim is we don't want you to be disadvantaged and have to carry all of this financial burden to have to get the same breakthroughs that we've had, right?
Exactly. Like one better way than learning from your own mistakes is learning from ours, right? So I know you and I we chatted a bit before. I just think it's such a cool thing of what you're doing, right now with your life. And it's not about you, right? We know that it's not about me. It's the point is that we talk a lot about vision, and that's where I started. Like I talk about that. Part of that is that vision. Like if you don't know where you want to go, anywhere is going to be fine, right? It's knowing where you want to go, and there's no right way to go. It's just really up to you. It depends on your values. It depends on your passions. It depends on maybe your life situation. I'll kick this off because mine might be very boring to a lot of people. Fine. I don't mind that. I have a different vision, right? My vision is people may not realize, but it is the top one or two or three most expensive places on Long Island. Very expensive, very high tax, real estate taxes, high everything, right? Really, really expensive place to live. And we enjoy it. But my wife stays at home, and we have four young children. She homeschools the children, and that's not like really typical, right? Because most of it's dual incomes, and everybody's trying to keep up with the Joneses and everything else. And for us, it's like this is like our vision, right? This is what we want. This is the lifestyle that we want. We want to have time. Time is the most important thing to us. So children's being raised, by us and spending just a lot of time together as a family, that is a huge part of our vision. Yeah, we do want to do some other things as time passes. Right now, our youngest is only today, actually, he's 9 months today. That's kind of like the lifestyle that we have right now. And another thing for me is with the businesses, I do enjoy it. It's not all about the business. I don't want it to be. I want to have my other passions, which you and I share one, and we'll hopefully get to that. But it's being able to do the things that I want to do. I don't want to feel like I'm stuck doing this thing because I have to make money to pay this bill. I want to have the financial freedom to say, if I want to write a book, I can write a book. If I want to work with these kind of clients, I can do that. If I want to start whatever it is, that's kind of like what it's about for me at this point in terms of, getting ahead financially. And that's great. But then there's a guy like you who's doing something totally different. And I respect it immensely. And I think it's really, really awesome. And I just want people to hear, like, there's different ways to do this. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about, what you're doing and even why you're doing it and how that came out.
Yeah, I'll give you the backstory first, Billy, is that my parents were extremely hard workers. They worked 6-hour days for as long as I could remember. My first mentor was my father. I worshipped the ground that my dad walked on. He taught me so many valuable lessons. He was really well read. He was very, very intelligent. He taught me some amazing lessons around philosophy and just really helped me establish my values as a human being. And as a kid, my dad decided to work night shifts to be available for me, to wake me up in the morning, get me ready, take me to school, pick me up in the afternoon, and only to rinse and repeat the whole process again. So he sacrificed a lot to be present. And we were too poor to have a car. So he had a bicycle that he fabricated a small seat on the back that I would sit on and cling to his back as he kind of ride to school and back every day. Now, riding to school, there was a hill that he needed to tackle. And he tackled this hill with the exact same strategy every day. As he struggled up it, he would repeat the same 4 words over and over. No pain, no gain. No pain, no gain. It was a metaphor for his life. He'd committed working 40 years with the intention to retire at 65 and then enjoy 20 years if he was lucky. But I was never motivated by this. Like, the idea of this whole 40-20 just doesn't make sense. But it was his decision. It was how things were done. And we fast forward to 2017 and my dad's 66. And he should have been 1 year into his golden times of enjoying his life and having this freedom. This time he was lying in a hospital bed and he was clinging to life with late stage pancreatic cancer, given weeks to live. The gamble that he made of the 40-20 didn't pay off and he regretted a lot of things. And on his deathbed, he gave me one last piece of advice. And he said, Jackson, every person in this world has 2 lives. And your second life starts when you realize that you only have one. And he died shortly thereafter. And my second life started on that day, that I realized that there are 3 freedoms that we need to be truly free in life. As a business owner, you need profit freedom. Because if we have profit, we have the ability to buy back our time. We can hire people. Instead of us trading time for money, we can now trade our money for time, but also the financial means to enjoy that time. Because nobody wants to just have that time and sit at home eating cornflakes for dinner, right? The second thing we need is we need time freedom. We need to have the ability to have time and space out of our business to be able to enjoy the reason why we're working so hard in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need wealth freedom. We need to have financial means that gives us passive resources, that gives us freedom of choice. Because I know for myself as an entrepreneur, I will always be in business until the day I die.
Mm-hmm.
I have no intention to retire. Retirement is not something that interests me at all. So my aim is to build up my business to a point where I can have enough profit to be able to live the life that I want. Have the time freedom that allows me to pursue and have the quality of life it experiences, and then have enough surplus that I can create the passive means that gives me choice if the things that I want and the opportunities I want to pursue shift and change. And that's what led us to this trip. A year ago, I'd started planning and I said, I'm going to spend a year traveling around Australia and running my business from the road. And it took me a year to plan it out. And we're now 9 weeks into the trip. I'm working 40% less and we've had back-to-back record months since I left. And it just goes to show that you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me with that, couple things, but how you didn't just do it, right? You had the vision to do it, you had the reasons to do it and the motivation, and then you had the plan, and it worked out really well for you. So I want people to understand that when they're listening to this. It's like, yeah, you can do it, but it's not an overnight success story because and you're still putting in the work, but it's
Yeah.
just a matter of you designing basically the ideal scenario for you in your life. I know one of the ways you did that, there's an area that I personally wanted to touch on because I just thought it was brilliant how you described it. I'm sure a lot of people listening, they're self-growth people, you read books, you know about the quadrants of Stephen Covey and the one thing, about just focusing on that most important thing, things that are going to have the most impact. So you had a great way of explaining that on the podcast with Jim, which I think is great for people to hear. So I don't know, would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yep.
So basically, it doesn't matter what business you're in. There are 4 quadrants that we can focus on at any point in time. There is marketing, it is generating leads and opportunities into the business. There's sales, it's turning those leads and opportunities into paying clients. There's delivery, delivering on your promise and turning those clients into raving fans. And there's growth, running a sustainable and scalable business that either allows you to take profit off the table or to reinvest to continue to grow and scale your business. So we need to understand where the opportunities lie in your business. Now, sales cannot exist without marketing, delivery can't exist without sales, and growth can't exist without delivery. And it's just about understanding these 4 quadrants and understanding where you're investing your time that's actually going to push the needle forwards in these areas. What we then do is, because there's so many things that we can be doing, there's so many competing priorities as a business owner. One of the exercises we do, which comes back to that point of reflection, is that we need to complete what we call a low value task matrix. In business, your tasks are going to be categorized as either high value, that really push the needle forwards and get you closer to your goals, or low value, that are a distraction and that are actually wasting your time. And tasks that you really love doing, that fill you up, that are easy to do, that you could do all day, that you're directly in flow, and tasks that you loathe doing. It's like pushing a rock up a hill. And the first thing you need to do as a business owner is understand, where are your current tasks fitting in that high value, low value, love and loathe. Do a time audit. Take the last 2 weeks of all of your activity and work out on average, where is your time being spent. And in my experience, the vast majority of business owners are either spending their time in low value tasks or tasks that they absolutely hate. It's that old kind of 80-20 adage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you spend 80% of your time doing things that deliver 20% of the result and 20% of your time on the things that deliver 80% of the result. What if we can spend 80% of our time in your zone of genius, the things that are high value that you really love doing? And this is the crux of what we do. And this is how I run my business and how we teach our clients to put value on their time, because time is the rarest commodity. It's the only thing that we all have the same amount of and that we can't manufacture any more than what we've got.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things to that. It's so powerful. So I'll just kind of give you some props because I just been interacting with you. I see that you live this out, right? Because you have your assistant and you're not doing these things that somebody else can do. And one thing I'll say, even for myself, is a lot of times, and I'm sure we've all fallen into it, but it's so important to have an awareness. And that's why doing that time audit is crucial. I do a time audit at least 1 week every quarter just to kind of make sure, because you can easily drift back into doing some things that maybe aren't the best things for you to do. I know Peter Drucker was big on that. And the best managers they're just so disciplined with how they spend their time. Some of them keep a constant time audit. And if you don't have that awareness, you'll end up doing things. And it's just, when you give them up, you realize it really wasn't a big deal. There are things that I've done even recently, because after things changed after the pandemic and I started doing some things that I wasn't doing before, and you just get into the habit of doing it, and they're taking you, even if it's 10 minutes, you start doing some math on that. You're like, man, I do this 10 minutes and I do it every day. And I realized, what is that per week, per month, per year, per 5 years, per 10 years? I mean, you can keep going, and how much time, by you having an assistant set up the podcast, that's saving a few minutes here, a few minutes there, and it adds up like crazy. And that's the thing that I think I just want to drive home. And then finally, because I know sometimes you could listen to this stuff, and I want to be transparent, is like, you think, the people on the podcast like have it all perfect. And it's like, that's not always the case, right? Because we're all human. So wherever you are, just look at that time audit and start looking and saying to yourself, what are the things, like using your scale, right? What are these things that are really low value? And what can I realistically start giving up? Just take one thing at a time. Because I know for me, even with the podcast, there's things that I'm doing that I'm better off not doing. But you got to give yourself a little bit of grace, but then make a plan and get it off your plate so you can focus on those higher value things. And then, like, the energy standpoint, right? Because which is what I want to get into next, if you're okay with it, is like the energy. It's not just the time, because now you took 10 minutes to email somebody that somebody else could have done. And now your mind has shifted from that like deep work or whatever you want to call it to this other thing. Yeah. And there's a lot behind that. It's powerful.
I agree, because like where we work best is in flow, right? And I have so many clients that I speak who they're like, oh, my phone just constantly rings and I can't get anything done. Like I just get these constant distractions. And if you can't be in flow, because when we're in flow is where we do our best work, then it's going to completely destroy your productivity. And you
Mm-hmm.
might be busy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are productive. The key part here is that you need to be fiercely defensive of your time.
Love it.
There's three stages that we all go through. We go trading time for money, so then we can trade money for time, so then we can get to a point where we can trade money for money. And it's
That's
getting
good.
to that point where we really get to financial abundance, where the world is our oyster. We can do everything that we
Mhm.
want. But where we all get stuck is trading time for money, and we're just not putting that value on that time, which is really critical.
I'm really glad we were able to get that point, because that was one of the things I really want to make sure we covered. Kind of bring it back to maybe a little more of lifestyle. You and I discovered we all have a hobby that we share, which is BJJ, or Brazilian
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu. So I think it's important to remember that it's not just work. Maybe you enjoy work, and I do, and you do, and that's great. But it's still important to have other things that you're doing. Maybe it's stuff with family. Some people like to fix things. Some people like to do another activity or a sport. I mean, it could be anything, right? But I know for me, it's been pretty much life changing just being a practitioner for so many years. But what about for yourself? I know you're a purple belt, which is pretty serious business. You don't want to mess with a purple belt. So what has that been like for you? How has that helped you in business or just in life? What are your thoughts on that?
Jiu-Jitsu has been the most valuable and the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm.
It's so difficult to explain for people who haven't done it before. But my old man was a lifelong martial artist. I've dabbled in martial arts most of my life. One of my biggest regrets as a kid is that I never followed through with martial arts. I was always that kid that would start things and do it for like 3 or 6 months and then stop and then move on to the next thing. But as an adult, doing jiu-jitsu, it's something that I'll aim to do for the rest of my life. It is so difficult. There's never something that is so hard that you can't fake, that is so sometimes emasculating and just soul destroying,
Uh-huh.
but so fulfilling and so full of growth at the same time. And I owe so much to jiu-jitsu because my significant other, Anna, we met when I was training jiu-jitsu in Florianopolis in Brazil. We've now been
Nice.
together for 7 years. She's moved to Australia as a result. It's some of my best friends are around jiu-jitsu. It's just been one of the best things that I've ever done in my life, by far the most difficult. What's been your journey with jiu-jitsu, Billy? How did you get started? And I guess what have been the
Yeah.
key learnings for you?
Man, this could be a whole nother podcast. The start of it was had some very unhealthy behaviors and mindsets when I was younger. I was kind of like lost my way. I was bullied as a kid, and when I got older, people who know me now would never believe this because they just would never believe it because I'm a totally different person. Part of that is my faith, my character, everything is so different about me. I went through a phase where I just wanted to be the tough guy. So I was going around getting into fights and getting into all types of trouble. I think I started off with Muay Thai and I liked it. I just to learn how to fight, but it was just like the coolest thing. And I just felt like, oh man, I just loved it. And I ended up meeting somebody who knew about jujitsu, which at that point I never heard of it. I ended up trying the first day, I remember the first class. I remember the guy's name. The guy's name was Randy, and I hadn't seen him in 20 years, but he was probably about like 145 pounds, a little stocky guy, but very short and stocky. And here I am, like 6'2", 190, and I was more into lifting weights then, so I was probably 15 pounds, bigger. And he gets on top and he mounts me, and I couldn't get this little sucker off me. And it was like the most frustrating thing I've ever been through. And I started getting claustrophobic and I couldn't get him at me. And it was then, you talk about like with the finances, that moment when you make that decision, it was then that I said, I am going to learn this. Because I just thought it was just amazing. And he wasn't even that good. He was probably like a blue belt. I mean, it's good, but he wasn't like he had only been training for however long, a couple of years or whatever it was. And that was that start of it. And there's been a lot since then. But same thing here. It's one of the most it is one of the most fulfilling parts of my life. I think it's just important that whether it's jujitsu or something else, that I heard a lot of people say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for my hobby. You're never going to have time for it. You decide what to do with yourself. You decide what to do with your time. You decide. It's that whole thing, like show me your calendar, show me your bank account. I'll show you what's important. And we all choose what we do with those things. And so I just encourage people to do that. And the more I've studied successful people, because I just love hearing about different stories, it's the opposite of what people think. People think the successful guy is the one that works 100 hours. But one of my favorite books, I've actually read it, I think it's 7 times now, is Good to Great, and Jim Collins. And one of the points in that book, he talks about how these are the greatest CEOs in history, many of them, and pretty much right across the board, none of them were obsessed with work to the point that they neglected other important areas. There was one who was more likely to be found tinkering around in his garage than at a meeting. It was just like, and that helps because it gets your mind off of the work, and it allows you to get more creative, to get reinvigorated, and then come back that much stronger. And I like that whole like sprinting style, right? You go hard, take a break, go hard, take a break. And so, yeah, that was my long answer to your question about what it's done for me.
I love that, mate. Look, what's been really interesting is through my jiu-jitsu journey, there are points where you hit this plateau, right? Like you have these growth spikes, but then you hit this plateau. Sometimes you get worse and you're like, why am I making these stupid mistakes? This is so frustrating. And then you take a step back from it. You take a break, you take a few weeks off, you let the body heal, and then you come back and then you are just better than ever.
Absolutely.
I've learned so many metaphors from jiu-jitsu that are just great metaphors for life and business around resilience and perseverance and stepping back from problems in order to then charge forwards. That has just been so immensely valuable. But I think one of the most important things, and I'm not there yet, but I am committed to getting there no matter how long it takes me, is that the path to becoming a black belt in jiu-jitsu is one of the most difficult paths that you will ever go on in your life. What rank are you now, Billy?
So I got my black belt in 2015, 2016. And so going through my journey, I will say that the hardest part was going from blue to purple.
You can roll around and you can be a bit arrogant and you can make mistakes, but to come back into the gym as a blue belt and keep training is really hard. I found that myself.
Yeah, that's where most people don't make it. Most of the dropout. I think I was 5 years as a blue belt, and then I was only like a couple, almost I think less than 2 to brown. So it was like a big difference. It was partly just my focus and my training and everything else. But yeah, so it's a long journey.
100%. What is the most fulfilling part of being a black belt in jiu-jitsu, would you say?
Well, one of the things I can say, to give a shout out to my coach, Greg DiPasquale. So I got to brown belt under Matt Serra, and I trained with them for many years. And then I ended up through scenarios, different reasons, I ended up with Greg DiPasquale, and he's just such an awesome friend and guy and coach. Just nothing like him. He's a really special guy. And I was actually his first black belt. So that is like a super proud thing for me. Another proud part of that was, I'll never forget when I was awarded the black belt, they had told, can't remember if they told my wife to come or they told me to bring her, whatever it was. And she was there. And I can't remember how many kids I had at that point. I think I had only my second one is going to be 6 next week. And I believe before she was born, and it was just really, you never think you're there, right? No matter how good you are, you never think you're there. And then to get that, and it was powerful. And then there's the other side to that, of like, there's the saying, like, you're just getting your training wheels as a black belt, because that's a mistake I don't want to make. And I think that's a good point thing to bring up, is that the results and the destination, but you could really, like, in some ways, I don't mean to say this, because when I gave my speech for the black belt, and I said, and I was so like nervous, I didn't know what to say. I said something so stupid. Greg was there, and Ryan LaFleur, all these UFC fighters, and it was this big thing. And I said, "Oh, this is nothing." But I meant, like, in a good way, like it's nothing, meaning like I have so much further to go. And I was like, no. It's like, it's not nothing. This is like unbelievable. But I don't want to get lost in the accomplishment. In some ways, you can like throw that out, because it all starts today. Right. I could like stop training. I can start eating like garbage. I can, do all these things. And yeah, I did accomplish that. And you can never take that away from me. But at the same time, it's not like you arrive there and then that's it. So I think there's like 2 sides to that. And at one level, it's like really an awesome feeling. But at the other, it was the same thing when I cleared the debt. I don't know if you have that experience, but it's like sometimes an accomplishment is like the emptiest thing, because like you're working your tail off and you like achieve this thing. And you're like, man, where's the balloons? Where's the party? Like there's still problems. Like it's kind of like a weird thing. Like you work so hard. And I think about that with money. It's like you work so hard to become financially free. Like for what? Because, none of us are taking it with us. So that's when it really comes down to the journey. That's, to me, a big part of it is, of course, it's what you're leaving, your legacy, and that's huge. But it's, you could be a white belt, you doing some hard training, or you could be a black belt. Either way, you're moving forward, you're getting better. And that's really what it's about.
I love that, mate. And funnily enough, my book is called Enjoy the Journey for this exact reason, because you're right. Yeah. An achievement is such a fleeting moment, and it can be really empty. I think you described this really well, that you go, cool, that's great. What's next? And it's just it's enjoying that journey that's the most important part, because to be honest, achieving the goal itself is never as fulfilling as what you think it to be, what you visualize it to be when you're going after it. And it's not to say that goal setting and working towards things is not important. In the
No.
contrary, it's extremely important.
Yeah.
But it's just taking the time to actually enjoy the moments and actually going through the process that's actually the most fulfilling part. So I
Absolutely.
love that, mate.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I remember writing that last check for when we paid off that debt, and it was so odd. It was like, because it was like the chase was over, and it was like, like, I want to get back in debt. No, no, I don't want to do that either. So yeah, anyway, so I cut you off. What were you saying?
This is a really good segue, mate, because I think this has a lot of metaphors and a lot of applications for fit pros. We
Mhm,
work with a lot of gyms, a lot of fitness professionals as well. And I feel that among all industries, they have some of the worst financial baggage that I've seen.
mhm.
They abdicate responsibility, they bury their head in the sand, it's not their problem. They get themselves into some really precarious situations. And you've had more experience in this area than me, Billy. So I'd really love to hear from you. What are the biggest frustrations and shortfalls that fit pros make when it comes to their money management?
Well, one of the things I think of immediately is, and it doesn't make any sense, but they're so passionate about, there's so many parallels with, fitness and finances, but there's just like a disconnect. Like, they're so passionate about coaching and training and getting the next certification and learning the best way to do a squat and all these things. Meanwhile, like, I can't tell you how many guys and gals have hired me, and they're like, even like some bigger names, like you wouldn't even know. That's another thing. So you just never know who you're dealing with and what their situation is. You think, because somebody's on Facebook with a crowded gym, that maybe they're doing really well. Not so much. I've had a lot of those people contact me, and they're like maybe 2 weeks from possibly closing their business. So that's one thing, is that you just never know what's going on with people. But as far as like what they're doing themselves, I think it's similar to what I did at first, and it's, burying their head in the sand, thinking that things are just going to magically work out. But no, they're not. They're not going to work out unless you make them work out, unless you start analyzing where you are. They don't know the numbers. So, what are the numbers? What's the gross sales? What's the profit? What's your payroll? All these like basic things. How many leads did you get? I don't know how many leads I don't know. I got a lot. What is that? So I realized the more that I've gotten into this, that those little things, like knowing your numbers on a weekly basis, is like everything, right? Because if you don't know, you can't. If you what's the saying? Like, you can't manage what you don't know. And those are some of the things that come to mind. I don't know why with fitness it seems like, I wonder if, I'm just thinking off the cuff here, but I wonder if part of it is people just like kind of masking things with fitness, because it's kind of like a cool industry in some ways, right? It's working out and looking good. So I think sometimes that kind of lends to being insecure and not being willing to face the hard reality of what's going on here. So I think that could be part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I think it's definitely a self-esteem thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the industry, financial services industry, doesn't do anyone any favors, but particularly fit pros. That the industry has led everyone to believe that it's so complicated that no one
Mm-hmm.
can ever learn it. You need to have a degree, or you need to have a fiduciary or an expensive CPA in a top firm to be able to manage this stuff for you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you need to have people around you that are smart, that can help you with things, but you don't abdicate the responsibility and just throw your hands up and just let them handle it for you, because that's just blind faith in people that you don't even know what they're doing. They could
Mm-hmm.
lead you astray, and that could cost you a lot of money. And we've seen it happen before. But I think there's really three aspects here. One, most people aren't taught how to plan when it comes to actual financial plan. People have dreams, they don't have goals, because they actually don't know how to bring them to life. I think the second thing, and you nailed it, is that they don't know their cash. They don't know their cash flow,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know the numbers to track. And for that reason, they go, hey, like, why don't I have any money in the bank account? And then the third thing is they don't have consistency.
Mm-hmm.
They might spend 1 month doing great lead gen and having all these new clients coming on board, and then they spend the next month delivering. And then they wonder why the month after that, they've got no money in the bank.
Yeah.
And it's just the roller coaster, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The consistency is huge. And then lack of systems a lot of times, right? Because
Correct.
a lot of leads came in, and we've all been there. I've been there, right? A lot of leads came in. So now I have to fulfill on that. I have to deliver, and that's important. But then what happens the next month when those leads dry up, and now you didn't do any marketing because it wasn't systematized to bring those consistent leads in? A lot of that comes down to the systems.
I agree, mate. And look, I'm a big believer of what gets tracked gets measured, and what gets measured gets improved.
That's the quote I was trying to say before. And another thing you hit on that I'm also really passionate about, really, really passionate about. I think I did a whole episode on not abdicating the responsibility. Nobody gonna watch your money like you. I don't care if you have the world's best financial planner, best CPA, have those things, and I have good people, and I've caught things. It's just the nature. Everybody think of themselves, right? And that's just normal. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not supposed to. They're not supposed to take as much responsibility as you are. Their job is to do what they do, and so I'm really passionate about teaching people that. And if I can learn, anybody can. And I mean that. I'm not just trying to sound like falsely humble, because I had zero financial knowledge, and I only learned from getting into trouble and then getting really curious, which I think is huge, because I wanted to learn, and realizing that, like you said it perfectly, like it's almost like they're trying to trick you into thinking that you need to pay all this money to learn about it, where it's like, you know what, it's not that scary. And let me give one tip on that, and that is to just take your time and one step at a time to start learning a little bit more about it. I'm sure we can recommend some books, or they can check out your material, my material, but it's really, I think it comes down to confidence. And that's what it was for me. It was just confidence. I just thought, there's no way. I don't know anything about money. How can I do this? I know about training. I'm sure that's what a lot of trainers are thinking. Whereas I am telling you, it is not that complicated. What you need to know to get very far is very simple. And yeah, there's always going to be more to learn. So I like to talk about getting more money smart or money smarter. And that's great. I think we should always do that.
I agree with that, mate. Look, because I guess the big thing is that with a simple financial operating system, you can manage this stuff for yourself. And I think the thing that most people don't understand is that the barrier to become a financial advisor, a qualified financial advisor, is actually really low. People who can call themselves a financial advisor or an investment broker often only need to do a couple of days course, even a few month course, to be able to get accredited to provide life-changing advice. I was a financial advisor at the age of 19 when I looked 12.
Oh, wow.
And I completed a diploma to be able to give people sometimes twice my age, even 3 times my age, life-changing advice, which is very scary. And this is the thing to realize, that you got to be mindful that you can learn these things in a really short amount of time and do a better job than many fiduciaries could do on your behalf. So I think that's really, really key.
Awesome. This has lived up to my expectations. I hope you agree. I hope
This has been great.
I hope the listeners agree. I don't know what you do towards the end of your episodes, but I usually do a little, like, couple fun questions. I don't know if you want to do a couple of those, or.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, cool. So one of mine is, I'm such a passionate learner. So I always like to ask people, what are some great things you've learned, whether it's a book, an author, a podcast, course. I'm going to put show notes for our stuff, but what's the most maybe life-changing financial book that you've read or that you recommended?
Yeah, I really think that a great book is Unshakable by Tony Robbins. I think Tony is an absolute master of being able to take really complex stuff and making it simple and kind of debunking a lot of myths around things. And I think it's probably one of the best financial books that really just uncovers the myths that plague the industry, particularly in the US. The US is far behind the regulations of places like Australia and the UK, in my opinion. And that means that there's still a lot of sharks out there who can get paid product-based commissions and flog products that line their pockets and don't put you first as the client. So it's really important you understand what to look out for if you are looking to find a fiduciary, a money manager, a financial advisor or financial planner to give you advice that could be life-changing. It could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that's a really good book that lifts the lid on that. A second book, which is a little bit of a difficult read, which is a book by a guy called Ray Dalio called Principles. Ray is one of the, unless you're in the finance space, you probably don't know him, but he runs one of the largest hedge funds in the world. He's built a career on creating decision-making principles and frameworks that have allowed him to create billions upon billions upon billions of dollars for his clients. And in his book, he takes you through his decision-making process of how he creates decision-making matrices. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I think everyone should learn how to make better decisions. How about you, Billy?
Yeah, man, that's good stuff. I'll just comment on yours first. So Tony Robbins, I have not read the one you mentioned, but I read his other book, Money Master the Game. And he talked a lot about that in that book as well. That was a huge book. And that was definitely the biggest takeaway I got from that book was, and that's why I first started learning about that, because I never knew that. I thought it was just normal. Like, hey, you got a financial advisor. That's just how it is. Just like I'm a personal trainer, you hire me and that's how it is. And I just kind of never really thought about it. So that's a good call. And then as far as principles, that's on my list. And maybe this is going to encourage me to start to read it sooner, but I know some people that I really respect that have really good things to say about that. I'm excited to read that. See, man, the reason why I ask these questions is because I have a hard time answering these. I've read so much, and I feel like every book I read, like it's like my new favorite book. So it's like, it might just be like the one that's on my mind. I'll just throw a couple of people out there, and these are not going to be shockers in a financial conversation, but I recently reread Millionaire Next Door, and it's a classic. And I just like the combination of the statistics, and maybe that's a little bit nerdy of me, but I like the statistics combined with the stories and just kind of like the way he words things. I just find it kind of fascinating. So I enjoyed that. And another book that is not financial per se, but I think would be totally life-changing for people would be Atomic Habits, because it's all about what we talked about, being consistent. It's about those leading activities, right, that lead to the lagging results. And I think if we can get that stuff, then we're going to be in good shape. But there's so many of them.
Love that, man. That's fantastic.
So, man, I think we're about out of time here. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you want to share for people before we
Yeah, I think what would be good for our respective audiences is kind of ideal clients and how we can help. So for me, I work with service-based business owners all around the world who want to understand the language of money, maximize their profits, and then systematically turn business profit into personal wealth. We teach them a financial operating system that helps them manufacture financial freedom in 10 years or less. And we really want to help more people be able to achieve those goals. So if you're a service-based business owner, no matter where you are in the world, and you want to get help with creating that financial operating system and just learning the language of money so you can make better financial decisions, and I'd love to help. How about you, Billy? Who are you looking to connect with? Who's an ideal client for you?
Yeah, so the ideal clients for me are anybody in the fitness industry. So it could be personal trainer, gym owner, and I'm just passionate about coaching. So just basically taking somebody where they are, trying to get an understanding and helping to serve as a guide. I believe that, if you're listening to this and maybe you're in debt, or maybe you're just not where you want to be, maybe you need help understanding your numbers. I believe you have what it takes, but it's a lot of times it takes somebody to come alongside and kind of pull out of you what you already have. And yeah, I'm going to share my experience, but ultimately I'm going to help you get to your destiny just by coming alongside of you and being in your corner, giving you some perspective and giving you some accountability towards those financial goals, and just seeing people achieve that financial freedom so that they can live the life. Like you said, you only get one time around this merry-go-round. So let's make it count. And I really want people to have that ideal life, spend time with the people they want. They can do the things that they want, and they can make the impact that they want.
I love that, man. This has been fantastic. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. I knew we'd have a good conversation, but I think this has far exceeded my expectations, mate. So I'd love to do this again sometime.
Awesome, Jackson. Just share real quick your contacts. I'm gonna put it in my show notes. So where people going, websites, whatever it is, social media.
Yeah, feel free to add me on Facebook. Just search for Jackson Millan. You'll be able to find me. I share all of my antics every day and share some valuable insights each day to help you push the needle forwards in your profit, winning back your time, and creating more wealth. Feel free to jump on our website, resfinancial.com.au. And we're also going to include a 40-point performance scorecard that helps you work out exactly how you're traveling towards financial freedom. Scary thing, the average score is about 18 out of 40, but it'll help you work out exactly what you need to do to get yourself on the right path. So we'll include that link in the show notes. How about you, Billy?
Awesome, Jackson. And one more. How about your podcast?
Our podcast is called Enjoy the Journey. Essentially, we speak with interesting cats like yourself and ultimately try and share some great stories that help people use that inspiration to create more value in their lives and their businesses.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So for me, same thing, social media, my name, Billy Hofacker. There's not tons of us. Second thing is the website. It's yourfitnessmoneycoach.com. And then finally, the podcast is the Your Fitness Money Coach podcast. So man, yeah, good stuff, man. I'd love to hear more about your traveling adventures and just love what you're doing.
I appreciate it, brother. Look forward to chatting to you soon.
Thanks, Jackson.